Have you ever wondered why some people just can't forget their first love, no matter how many years go by or how many relationships they've had since? There's something almost haunting about that first person who made your heart beat faster. And if you're one of those people who still think about your first love from time to time, this video might explain exactly why. So stick around, because the psychology behind this is way deeper than simple nostalgia. First love hits differently, and psychologists have been trying to understand why for decades. It's not just a random crush or a high school romance you eventually outgrow. For many people, their first love becomes a kind of emotional blueprint, shaping the way they love, trust, and even experience heartbreak afterward. And that's exactly what we're going to explore today. People who can't forget their first love often feel confused or even embarrassed, as if they're holding on to something they should have moved past by now. But the truth is, the brain doesn't treat first love like any other experience. It stores it in a special way, almost like your first major emotional memory. And that memory can stay surprisingly fresh, even decades later. So if you've ever caught yourself thinking about someone from your past while sitting at a drive-thru eating fries from McDonald's, or listening to an old song on Spotify, trust me, you're not weird, you're human. And your brain might be doing something totally normal and meaningful. Point 1. First love is a neurological first imprint. The first time you fall in love, your brain releases a cocktail of chemicals: dopamine, oxytocin, adrenaline that you've never felt before at that intensity. Your brain marks the experience as something important, almost like the emotional version of a first taste. Just like you remember the first time you tried pizza or the first time you rode a bike, you remember your first love with intense clarity. The difference is, the emotional rush is much more powerful than any physical experience. And because the brain loves novelty, this becomes the template it silently compares every relationship to. Without even realizing it, you might be measuring new partners against that original feeling. This doesn't to mean your first love was better, it just means your brain doesn't forget the first emotional high. Point 2. Hormones hit harder when you're young. Most people experience their first love during adolescence or early adulthood, when hormone levels are at their absolute peak. This makes emotions feel stronger, deeper, and more dramatic. That's why everything from holding hands to late-night texting feels intense. Your brain remembers emotionally charged experiences far more vividly than neutral ones. That's why you can forget what you ate last Tuesday, but you still remember the smell of your first love's perfume or the exact moment you realized you liked them. Emotion plus novelty equals unforgettable. Point 3. First love happens before defense mechanisms develop. By the time you're older, you've probably built some emotional walls. You've learned how to protect yourself, how to recognize red flags, and how to avoid getting hurt too fast. But with your first love, you had none of that. You walked in wide open, hopeful, inexperienced, basically defenseless. That purity makes the experience feel magical, but it also makes the impact stick. You didn't love carefully. You loved freely. And your brain remembers that openness. Point 4. First love is tied to core memories. Think of your teenage years, the late-night drives, the first movie date, the butterflies in your stomach. These memories become core memories, the kind that shape your identity. Your first love is often woven into those memories. It's not just them you remember. It's who you were when you were with them. Younger, freer, less complicated. Sometimes you're not missing the person, you're missing the version of yourself from that time. Point 5. First heartbreak hits hardest. If your first love didn't last, the heartbreak that followed may have been your first real emotional loss. That type of pain hits harder because you don't yet know how to cope with it. You don't know that heartbreak I enter the world, you just feel like it is. That creates a strong emotional stamp that stays with you. Painful memories are stored deeper because the brain wants to learn from them. It's its way of saying, don't forget this was important. Point 6. First love shapes your attachment style. Your first love often influences whether you become secure, anxious, avoidant, or somewhere in between. If that relationship was supportive and healthy, you may have carried that security forward. But if it was full of ups and downs, you may have carried those patterns with you too. Attachment psychology suggests that the emotional patterns built during your first romantic experience can follow you into future relationships. That's one reason some people stay stuck mentally. They never fully process that first emotional blueprint. Point 7. Nostalgia makes first love feel better than it was. Your memory is not a perfect recording. It's more like a highlight reel. Over time, the bad parts fade, and the good parts get brighter. That's why you might remember the sweet moments, like getting ice cream together, but forget the arguments or insecurities. Nostalgia is powerful. It can make ordinary memories feel magical. Your first love may feel perfect in hindsight because your brain polished the memory over time. Point 8. First love connects to identity development around the time people experience their first love. They're also forming their identity, figuring out who they are, what they want, and how they see themselves. So your first love becomes tied to that phase of growth. They may have been the first person to tell you that you were attractive or interesting or funny. Their opinion helped shape your self-worth. So forgetting them feels almost like erasing a part of your own story. Point 9. First love often comes with what-ifs. Even if the relationship ended naturally, many people carry questions like, would it have worked if we were older? What if timing wasn't the problem? What if we met today instead? These open loops keep the connection alive. Humans don't like unfinished stories, and first love often ends before you're emotionally ready to close the book. Point 10. You never fully feel that innocent again. Every relationship after your first is shaped by lessons, sometimes trauma, sometimes wisdom. But that pure, innocent feeling of falling in love for the first time, you only get it once. Not because you can't love again, but because you can never be that version of yourself again. And that realization is what makes the memory so powerful. Here's the truth most people don't realize. People who can't forget their first love aren't stuck in the past. They're often deeply emotional, loyal, introspective, and capable of forming strong attachments. They feel love intensely and they remember love deeply. In psychology, this is actually a sign of emotional depth, not weakness. People who can't forget their first love usually have big hearts, vivid memories, and a strong ability to connect. They're the kind of people who love fully and feel fully. That's not something to be ashamed of. That's a rare strength. Your first love stays with you because it marked your heart, your brain, and your story. It shaped the way you understand love, the way you trust, and the way you hope. And even if you're not meant to be with that person anymore, the impact they left behind is part of who you are today. So let me ask you this. Do you still remember your first love? And what's the one memory that comes to mind first? Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to hear your story. And if you enjoyed this breakdown of psychology and love, hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs it, and subscribe for more weekly insights into human behavior and relationships. Thanks for watching. And remember, just because you can't forget your first love doesn't mean you can't create an even better love story next.